Good morning. Just jumping on here and starting the webinar. We're going to give a few minutes for folks to join us. See several folks starting to file in. Should be a good conversation this morning with Dan Manning, but again, give it about 2 minutes here and we'll get started. Just going to wait another minute or so here. It looks like we still had a few jumping on, although it looks like it's kind of slowed down. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. This is, I believe, our 9th webinar in this series. We've been doing these bi-weekly back since, I think, October of 2020. And today we're focused on developing local digital leaders. I've got with me today Dan Manning. Dan is a community technology advisor for Connected Nation, has worked extensively and lives in Michigan. And so look forward to having Dan help us through this conversation and this discussion today. A couple of housekeeping items for the day would be if you have questions, I would ask that you would drop those into the Q&A box. That allows us to better record those if we aren't able to get to them in our conversation today. And certainly, if necessary, you can utilize the chat, but the Q&A helps us capture that in a more functional format than the chat does. With that said, we'll go ahead and kind of dive into our conversation today. Dan, typically, I think a lot of our folks who have joined have met you before or have seen you on one of these webinars. And so I'm not going to do much of a teaser today, but why don't you give us a quick update on all that's going on in the communities that you work on in Michigan and maybe some of the things that you're excited about in the next 6 months or so.
Microphone here. Thanks, Wesley. I appreciate that very much, and welcome to everybody. I appreciate the chance we got to talk a little bit today. I've been with Connected Nation here in Michigan for the last almost 10 years now, working with communities across the southern half of the state. Spent a little time in a few other states as well, as we've expanded our program for Connected Nation across the country in different areas. But certainly there's an awful lot of things happening right now. This has really been a busy time for all of us here with all of the activity going on related to the COVID epidemic and what that's meant in terms of impact on residents and businesses and schools and every other facet of life of the things that we're doing. What we're really seeing is just a lot of activity now really helping raise the awareness of the issue as people are recognizing just how important it is to have good connectivity and to be able to get to all the resources that they need to and how to be able to function and even do their jobs. So the good news that's kind of come out of this is that it's really raised the level of awareness and attention and focus on getting better broadband across the state and across the country. So there's been new teams being formed. I know myself and the other community technology advisors are very active in working with communities, usually at a county level, in putting together teams, defining some objectives, going through some data collection processes and all to really understand what the nature of the problems are. So a lot of that activity is going on. A lot of new teams and communities are being focused on this, but it's not only a matter of raising that level of awareness and getting people focused on it. There's also a lot coming behind it to really back it all up, with lots of funding being available through a number of different federal and state programs that have come out over the last year or so to help expand broadband, especially in the more rural areas and those that haven't had service up till now. Lots of organizations supporting that, from the FCC to USDA. The state of Michigan has now got their own program to help fund some broadband projects, and lots of others as well. So we're seeing a lot more activity related to communities working with providers, and some of these new initiatives coming from a federal standpoint to help hopefully address a lot of those issues over the next coming years.
Yeah, Dan, you began to talk about, and we've talked about it on this webinar series a handful of times, a lot of new funding sources that are coming in, and oftentimes that's one of the resources that we all, particularly in our rural communities, kind of focus on, are those financial resources. But I think it's safe to say, and you'd probably agree with me, that oftentimes the most important resource in our communities is our people. And so with that, and it's a personal opinion of mine, but I think it seems to resonate in all the communities that we work with. It's also, one of the more important resources in our broadband and technology advancement are our people, right?
Absolutely.
There's funding sources that come and go and have been for years and years now. But in a community, particularly as we're talking about rural communities, it's the people that make that community special, and it's also those people who make things happen, and drive the success at a community level. What do you think are the most important characteristics for a strong digital leader in our communities?
Yeah, great question, and that really is the key to a lot of this stuff. You can have all the resources and data and information that you need in order to try to solve some of these problems, but if you don't have the right people or groups of folks really focused on it that have got the right vision and understanding of how to put it all together, then it never comes to fruition. So I think as I've been working across these various communities across the state, what we're finding is that if we can find some people that have really got a passion about broadband in itself and what it can mean in terms of impacting the lives of residents, helpful to businesses, helping improve efficiencies, helping with education, all of those kinds of things combined. If you've got some people or a person that at least has got that level of enthusiasm and excitement and vision of where broadband can take those individuals, I think that's one of the most important traits out of that. Somebody that can really understand what it could be with the successful implementation of broadband and all of its factors that go along with that. So I think the passion is a big part of it, having that kind of vision to know what the impact can be for the community, and really being able to understand that and move it in that direction. It doesn't necessarily have to be a real technical person in order to drive this. I think there's some of that perception out there. We found in some of our communities I've worked with, you can have technology leaders coming out of the economic development organizations or out of the county planning commissions, other groups as well. Even the libraries are pretty heavily involved in a lot of the work that we do and show a lot of leadership with that. So it's a variety of different backgrounds, but I think just having some good organizational skills, being able to be pretty well connected organizationally with other community leaders, know which resources you can pull on and who to talk to, and being able to navigate through that is real critical as well. And then just some basic project management skills in order to help coordinate a lot of this stuff, because there's lots of moving parts when it comes to trying to figure out broadband solutions in some of these areas. So you're working with providers, you're working with investors in some cases, you're working with funding sources, you're working with the end users, being the residents or the businesses that need the help. So it involves a lot of coordination to pull all that stuff together. And then I guess the last factor is somebody that's also got a fair amount of patience as well to be able to pull this off, because this is not the kind of thing that you solve overnight. You have to be looking for some incremental change and incremental progress over time, but stay on that path and stick to it to get to the ultimate solutions.
Dan, I think that that patience and perseverance side of this equation is so important, because like you said, in many cases it's going to be, small wins here and there that you're looking for. You're making minor adjustments. Oftentimes, especially when we talk about connectivity, sometimes it's just becoming very prescriptive about how you solve an issue for maybe 10 or 15 households in a particular area. When you do that and there's still 250 or 2,000 or 20,000 households that need to be that need better connectivity, that can be tough. And so the patience and perseverance. I would also add to that, as we see all of the funding that's coming in, so as those resources are being made available, and those resources are in many ways being made available for the connectivity side of things, somebody who's really good with just talking with people and motivating your local, even your kind of the standard local leadership, if you will, or energizing new people is so important, because as we've talked about, even if connectivity was a non-issue in a month from now, there's so much more to be done. I had an interaction yesterday with a provider who said, who offers a pretty expansive amount of service in their area, and they're going to be offering the EBB, the emergency broadband benefit. And I thanked him for them being willing to participate in that project and help people get connected. His whole comment was, but now we have to get people to use it. And so, it's the other side of this whole equation is that adoption and use, and finding leaders who understand, kind of the big picture of, yes, connectivity is an issue, but adoption and use is going to be an issue that is around for a long time. And funding for connectivity, at least as it stands today, is probably never been any greater than it is. And we'll see a lot of our connectivity issues being taken care of in many areas. There will always be, areas that need help. But we're really going to see a big shift towards adoption and use, and that's where those people skills really begin to need to flourish, right? As you gain, the opportunity to be in front of people, to get them more engaged, to help them understand why jobs that they're doing today may not be even jobs that we talk about in a decade or two from now. That patience and perseverance, and really just kind of driving a larger group towards the same kind of collective goal of greater equity, towards the use of even the broadband once it's available, if it's not already available in a particular location.
You raise a great point about this whole thing on broadband adoption and getting people to actually use it, and helping them be able to use the online capabilities that are there. And that's one of the things that are sometimes overlooked. And when you first get into the broadband space and you're trying to figure out how to get everybody connected, everybody tends to focus more on the physical aspects of that, and getting the cables run to your house, or getting the right towers in the right places so you can get the signal and all that. So getting that access certainly is critical in order to provide that infrastructure and make sure that ability is there. But the other side of that, and we can't really overlook that, is the ability to give people the chance to know how to use the technology, how to access the technology itself, how to get equipment, how to get the training they might need in order to use the internet, how to use laptops. Something just as basic as that. In a lot of cases, we kind of take that for granted, but there's a lot of folks out there that are still struggling with the technology and how to use that. And that needs to be worked into an overall plan as well to get people online.
Yeah. Dan, you touched on it a little bit just a minute ago, because oftentimes we think about, technology leadership in our community being somebody from the tech company, right? Whether that's the local computer shop, or whatever it may be, right? We always kind of go seeking out those people, but in reality, we're finding technology or digital leaders in all kinds of different entities. But is there any particular type of organization or business that you're seeing, strong digital leadership come from in your communities?
Well, like I mentioned a little earlier, it's really been kind of a mixed bag, frankly, coming from these different groups, and a lot of that is because it kind of comes back to those more those soft skills, if you will, that have to do with the passion and the ability to network and understand and work with other people and all that, those are really the traits. So, you know, you can find those people in other organizations, like I mentioned, either planning commissions or planning organizations. Could be technical companies that have got experience in working with technologies and as well. Could be coming from chambers of commerce in some cases, people that have got business experience and understand the impact of what broadband can do to a business and getting them enabled. So we really see that the background's kind of mixed. I think the kind of the planning skills, like I mentioned earlier, the business experience is certainly something that can be helpful when you're looking for digital leaders. Again, it kind of comes back to the passion and the motivation to really go after this kinds of stuff. In probably most importantly is just being a user of the technology and having those kinds of experiences and understanding how to use it so that you can relate better to the customers or the residents that you're trying to support. That's really critical as well. So if you can think of maybe a semi-technical, business-oriented person that's got their own experiences in working with the technology themselves, that's kind of the ideal candidate, I guess, in my mind, that has the overall leadership skills that can pull together the pieces.
Yeah. I was going to say, and I would second that, is in a community is seeking out those who maybe don't recognize themselves as leaders, but are engaged with the technology. And oftentimes it's maybe in an area or a sector that we don't traditionally think about as technology, right? So we've had some really, we do have, and my personal experience has been having some strong leadership come out of even the ag sector. Most communities don't think about ag as high tech, but it may be it's likely one of the most high tech sectors in our communities, particularly our rural communities. Kind of a technology revolution, if you will, that's gone on in the agriculture industry and continues to. Finding those people who are passionate about finding and having greater resources to make their businesses operate, honestly, like other businesses around the world, is oftentimes the passion that drives, finding these digital leaders, if you will, in a community, and them being passionate and understanding that if they want to hire, have employees in the next 5 to 10 years, gosh, we need to work with our libraries and other locations to do job training and so on and so forth. And I brought up libraries, and I'm glad for the comment. Somebody in the questions said, librarians do this and have been excited to continue it with new funding. And I think we're excited too. I think libraries maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, were struggling with the idea of a digital age and the relevancy issue. And I think libraries have moved beyond that and understand that they're probably more important now than they were before. And provide such a unique opportunity for folks who don't have access to the connectivity or the devices. Literally, the library has always been the gateway to information, and quite honestly now is oftentimes in rural communities the only gateway that may exist for those who don't have children, who have access at schools and so on and so forth. The libraries have become remarkably important for those who are unemployed or have no access to these services. It may be the only point of entry for new job skills. Just filling out applications for jobs and those types of things. So we're incredibly thankful in our communities for those libraries that are engaged, and certainly, in your own sectors, continue to encourage the libraries to be involved in these types of initiatives, as they are extremely important to it.
Absolutely. In most of the community teams that we've formed in various counties, the libraries are key players in all of those. And it's because of all of the opportunities and the services that they can offer to residents, but also that means that we need to make sure that the libraries are getting the right level of service themselves to be able to provide that.
Yeah. Dan, at what level, where should we begin to develop digital leaders? Do you think it's important to start, obviously it's important to seek out and find those people within your, the organizations that operate in the community. But is that where it starts, or should we be doing something, to engage younger folks? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's certainly important with technology being what it is and becoming such a bigger part of what we do every day. I think it's important to identify folks that have really got that kind of enthusiasm and interest as early as we can within a community. And that community might be somebody in local township government, for example. It could be, some of these other organizations I mentioned earlier with economic development or planning commissions or wherever that might be, lots of different places. But I think it's important to at least kind of keep your eyes open for those people that have shown that kind of passion and that kind of interest on doing things with technology, especially as it relates to broadband, and then putting them in positions where they can maybe join a team or a committee to work on a smaller project in order to give them a chance to be exposed to other things. Grow from there, maybe take on separate projects on their own at some point in time, and continue to get them exposed to other things that are going on in other communities outside of their own organization. Because the technology is so pervasive and it's changing so fast that kind of outside exposure of the other things that are happening around them is really important, so that they can bring back some of those best practices of what they're seeing in other places and use those in their own communities. So again, I think it could be across a variety of different organizations, but all of our existing leaders need to be aware of some of these up and coming folks that at least have got the traits and the interest to maybe taking on some bigger responsibilities down the road, and giving them an opportunity to build on that.
Yeah, the comment is ISDs and tech center students. And, I think oftentimes, even when we do community planning work, we kind of overlook, we talk about the reason for why we do this work, and that's so that there's a future, and that the residents of the community in the future have what they need, and so on and so forth. But then we often overlook who the future residents are. So I appreciate that idea of ISDs and tech center students. And I think it's important to understand the role that, students, even, middle school and elementary, the role that they can have as you do planning work in the community, to understand, number one, they're huge in helping, you to further define what's going on. The school districts have been a huge, really kind of a driver for the survey work that we do in many of our communities, because they just have such an expansive network that they can utilize to get those surveys out and get the responses back from. But then when you think about the students, we're talking about often some of the work that's going to be done now will have its biggest impact over the next decade. Who are those people that you want living in your community 10 years from now? And if you want them to be there, then let's hear what they have to say. And are there ways to integrate them into the conversations? What are their expectations? What is their view of technology in your rural community? So often kids emulate what they see. They follow along. And if we're not concerned about technology, and we're not concerned about bringing the type of connectivity to communities that are needed, where are our kids going to go? There's always this idea of the exit that happens after high school, students going away to college and so on and so forth. Part of that's because that's where they see the opportunity. And so, our responsibility in communities as we plan and build and expand our networks and the technology opportunities that exist in our communities is to show them that there is a place there for them. And so I think it's important that we, as our communities grow, as we take on the digital divide conversation and what we're doing each individually to address that, is to strongly consider the opportunities that exist with our students, whether that's, again, at the elementary school level, a middle school, even high school, obviously high school. How are we engaging those groups to understand what it is, what are their passions? What are their biggest concerns as it pertains to digital needs in a community, and being able to at least address and have a solid conversation with those age groups, I think leads towards the development of strong digital leaders in your community. Those leaders that in another 10 years may make your small rural community a hot spot on the map for a particular type of business. So I think that's another area of this that often we aren't really all that in tune with. Certainly probably not as much as we should be, but certainly something we should all be at least considering and thinking about.
Absolutely. And I do appreciate the comment that was entered here about the K-12 education and higher education as being sources for a lot of these technology leaders. A lot of the ISDs, the RESA organizations across the state are very active in driving a lot of connectivity across not just the schools, but through other parts of the community as well, and in taking a big leadership role in their counties. So that's something that we continue to leverage in every community where that kind of leadership exists, and it's just great to see.
Yeah, and I would say with COVID over the past year, I think we've begun to see new partners and new players in these conversations around not only connectivity, but also the adoption and use side, because I think so many traditional organizations who have had resources didn't recognize, it's not that they didn't recognize it, but just weren't as engaged in this conversation, and now recognize that they maybe have resources to bring to bear in the community, or there's just a totally different focus now. We talk about our schools, our K-12 schools, and so on and so forth. A year ago, nobody was thinking about delivering all of their content in a digital format, and now that's a totally different perspective, and trying to reach your students is a totally different perspective. And so it just has changed the conversation for so many different stakeholders in our communities, and really now is the time to have these conversations. Who are our leaders? Who are we overlooking? Where else do we need to look for leadership and the types of resources necessary to help our communities move forward? Dan, as we kind of get close here to the 10:30 mark, we're starting to move in on that. Anything else that we haven't touched on today that you'd want to hit before we check the Q&A, or any additional Q&A?
Yeah, maybe a couple of things. Number one, I know we're talking about technology leadership, and technology is awful broad when you want to look at that. A lot of our focus here at Connected Nation Michigan and Connected Nation General is really more on the broadband parts of technology and what that can mean for residents and businesses and organizations as well. There's also a technology part of the world that has to do with supporting internal businesses, organizations, county governments, all those kinds of things. So I think it's important to kind of keep in mind there is a bit of a distinction there, and maybe a difference in the kinds of skills, the kinds of people that you might need in order to play those kind of roles. So an IT director for a county, for example, might not be the same kind of person that you'd want to have to be driving broadband connectivity across your county and across the townships, and to be able to relate to those kinds of issues. And certainly that IT director would have to have much deeper technology skills in order to make their organizations operational and effective and all that too. So I just wanted to make that distinction out, depending on the kind of leader that you're looking for. Secondly, I know one of the bigger concerns, and I'm kind of surprised that it hasn't really hit the chat box yet here, is the whole idea of resource limitations in a lot of the communities. If you look at local governments, especially, trying to find somebody that can play that role as a broadband coordinator or manager to help drive a lot of this it can be a real challenge, because a lot of the folks, as working in these smaller municipalities and even at the county level, they've got multiple hats and they're doing multiple jobs at the same time. And to take a layer to say, okay, I'm now going to take another piece of this person and make him my broadband coordinator can be an awful lot to ask. And I'm kind of having those discussions with a couple of the communities I'm actively working with now, trying to identify who those kind of people are, and then how do we find them. And maybe this is an opportunity right now with all of the focus and all of the funding that's coming down to help with various things, including broadband. Maybe this is the time to start thinking as a community about the idea of having a focal point that you can hire or contract with to kind of play that role. If you can't get bits and pieces of other people to do that job, maybe there's a chance here to start looking at that as being a manager of digital communications or something like that you could put in place. It's not going to fit in every case, but maybe when you get to a county level, it's good to have that kind of focus if you can afford it and figure out how to staff something like that.
Yeah, I think it brings up a really good point. I think in the past, communities maybe could afford to not be as focused in this area. But I think, given what we've experienced in the past year and the understood need with the potential resources that are in play, there's probably just never been a more important time to find the focus and realign whatever that may be, those resources necessary to ensure that the community really is in a position to be actively engaged in the conversation. This idea, kind of the idea of the single point of contact, where someone helps providers and helps the community, kind of works in a neutral position to help the community gain access to the types of services they want and need, while also helping providers navigate, local, whether it be, local policy and local, permitting and so on and so forth, is probably has never been more important. There's a question in here. It says community surveys tend to be locked into technology only. That's understandable from an efficiency and resource perspective. But if someone doesn't have access to technology, their voice is significantly muted. What ideas, if any, do you have to address this void? Dan, do you want to touch on that? That's something we understand, admittedly understand that. You want to touch on that?
Yeah, this is one of the bigger challenges, right? Because you're trying to get as many people connected, and especially those people that are currently not connected or don't have any kind of service today. So, as we do a lot of our surveys and ask questions and get feedback from folks that are in the communities today, a lot of those, even the questions in the surveys, are offered online. So people still have to find a way to get connected in order to take the surveys to provide the data and the information that we're looking for. Trying to get out to those folks that have no means of getting that kind of connectivity can become a bit of a challenge. We encourage people to, if they have a mobile phone, a lot of the survey work that we do is mobile friendly, so it can be done that way. If they're employed in some fashion, more than likely they've got some kind of connectivity that they can use in order to be on long enough to take a survey while they're at work. We've used hard copy surveys in a lot of cases to make those available, maybe in public facilities like local township offices, county offices, Chamber of Commerce's buildings, any kind of public facilities, libraries as well, and just have stacks of these hard copy surveys for people to be able to respond and give us input that way. We've had townships in a lot of cases have done mailings where maybe they're mailing out tax forms at the end of the year. They could also include the broadband surveys that we do as part of those mailings in order to reach a lot of these people. Frankly, we're never satisfied that we're getting enough of those kinds of responses. We typically do get some hard copy responses when we send those out. We've done some things through schools where when the schools help us, they'll provide some of these surveys through the students, so the students can take them home and give them to their parents that way and have them mail them back to a given address. So it's a lot of manual work in order to try to make that work. But again, those are the people that we really want to get to understand what their issues and concerns are and how we can best get them connected. So I don't know that there's a great answer for that. Ideally, we'd like to have people go knock on doors and take surveys right there on the spot with folks. That's obviously very manually intensive and takes a lot of time and would be very expensive to do. But we're always looking for opportunities to get people together in a group and have multiple people take surveys. We used to go to events when there would be festivals in communities and counties and just have a booth set up somewhere or a table and just have stacks of surveys to fill out. Obviously, we're not doing much of that right now with COVID going on, so you don't have those kind of opportunities to get in front of people that way. But we're always looking for creative ideas on how we can reach those kinds of people.
Yeah, Dan, anytime this comes up, I always hate to miss the opportunity to talk about attaching them to pizza boxes. We had a community, I forget exactly where that was at, but
that was a creative
basically the pizza shop in town was that was where everybody ate. And so they worked with the proprietor there and attached surveys to the top of the pizza box and got a pretty good response. And Dan's right. We don't, unfortunately, we don't get nearly as many of those back as we would like to see. It's admittedly a pretty small percentage of hard copies that we receive information back on. But it's, again, you use every avenue that you can. Especially in the COVID era, it makes it even more difficult because we're not having those opportunities, the markets and the county fairs and those types of things where you can just set up a booth and, try to get those signatures and get surveys done. But certainly, any unique idea, we certainly try to employ that. And that's often when we're working in a community, we lean heavily against that community to say, what are the opportunities to be in front of people? How can you expose everyone to this idea and the need? And oftentimes it's exposing them to this idea and then having partners in the community who either make them available or make a computer available for someone to go sit down and do this work from. So the surveys are huge, and admittedly, there's not a great way when you can't go be face to face to get those filled out. There was a question that came in, and I don't know that we necessarily have a great answer, but Dan, I'll direct it towards you, and then we can do some follow up. It says, who do we contact at our community or local level to get things going or to be a part of if things are already started? I know in our county, the EDC put out a questionnaire, but have heard nothing since. Is there a listing of groups that have begun to meet, perhaps via Connected Michigan? And Connected Michigan has, certainly we can provide those communities that we're working in. But Dan, are you aware of other resources there?
Well, I guess I would point to either myself or Tom Stevenson, who's my partner who covers northern Michigan. I cover the southern half of the state. We're both actively working with many of the counties across the state on this connected program or survey efforts that we're talking about here. We can certainly point you to the right folks, but if you have some things that you'd like to participate in, or if you have additional data or information that you'd like to add to those efforts, we'd certainly like to take advantage of that and make sure it gets included, because the work that we do in each of the counties that we work with is to try to be as inclusive as possible, to gather as much information about current and ongoing activities that are currently happening to help drive broadband and broadband related projects. So if there are other organizations or groups or information out there that you want to make sure it gets included, feel free to contact me or my partner, Tom Stevenson at Connected Nation Michigan, and we can certainly be that conduit for you. I guess if I knew the specific county, I could probably answer on the spot here as to how to do that. But that's generally the way we'd like to do this. And again, if you have more information, we'd love to take advantage of it and work with you on
it. Dan, too, there's a question specific to Ingham County. Who would that be? You, or would that be?
That would be me. Unfortunately, we have not actively engaged with Ingham County to this point very actively. I've been on a couple of calls in recent weeks, frankly, with Alyssa Slotkin, a representative from this part of the state, talking about issues in Livingston County and Ingham County, but haven't really made that contact with the right people in Ingham County. So again, if there's somebody there I should be talking to, I'd like to know who that is. And please reach out to me, and maybe we can get something started, or at least let you know what the potential is.
Yeah, and I've posted both of our contact information, and we'll make sure to send follow up to those that have identified questions that we need to follow up to. But certainly feel free to reach out to us as well. I don't see any other questions. We've still got a couple minutes here. If somebody has anything else they'd like to ask, happy to hang on. But I'm not seeing anything else. So, well, Dan, I will we'll return some minutes back to everybody here. I do want to, as we kind of finish out today, remind everybody that Connected Nation Michigan is hosting a telehealth webinar summit actually this afternoon, and you can find information for that on the Connected Nation Michigan website. But that'll be going on this afternoon. We'll be talking about broadband as well as just telehealth in general, a couple of different panels that we'll be having. And Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist is actually our keynote speaker. It's always good to hear from him, and I'm sure he'll have some interesting comments. Such a wonderful speaker. We want to thank everybody today for your time, and we'll sign off, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. I'll follow back up with links for the video recording of this, as well as registration for the next meeting. Everyone have a great day today.
Thank you all.